Hi everyone, and welcome to this webinar number 8 of this Udacity Nano Degree for React. We will be talking today for this about it's a Redux course. We're still in Redux, but I just changed the logo of the presentation for React, just because this pattern we are going to see is for both React and Redux. So just wanted to see it from the whole picture. We're going to see. We're going to see a very nice pattern that is used a lot in React and Redux, and we will see that since last year it's not as much used as it used to be, but we will get there once the moment arrives. Okay, so what we are going to see first is what is a software design pattern. Usually from the Wikipedia definition we can see that it's a general reusable solution to a commonly occurring problem within a given context in software design. Okay, that's the definition, and that means that it's not a finished design that can be transformed directly into source or machine code. It's just in the way, a template, a description of how we should solve a problem that can be used in different situations. I think that last phrase is the most important part for defining, in human words, what's a software design pattern. Just describing how you should solve a common problem in many different situations. We are going to find it. So let me see one thing in the chat. Okay. Yeah. So they are just a tool and best practices for us, the programmers, to solve that common problems. And usually we have seen them during the course, even in the React Nano Degree, we have seen some of them mentioned, and lots of them. But I just wanted to, when you talk about something, you have to define it first. So this is the first time we say the word design pattern or software design pattern. So for them, we have like the KEYS principle, and the KEYS principle is they keep it simple, stupid. So that means if you can do things in different ways, just choose the easy way. The dry principle is both things are used in React, but dry is one of the most used. That is like, don't repeat yourself. Usually, if we make a component that is always doing the same things, maybe we can create a further component, or a component where we can compose the other components from, and just defining it with props, so we can reuse that component. And the MVC pattern, that's the most common and the most used, the most known software design pattern, the model view controller. As we're going to talk about the container pattern, or container representational components, I like to call it container pattern. We have to talk about this pattern, this MVC pattern. So what is MVC? MVC is just an architectural pattern, or a design pattern, or software design pattern, the same words, that it's used for developing user interfaces. This comes that it's not for the backend, it's not for the server, it's not for databases, it's just for what the user sees, the user interface, the guy. So it divides that part of the application, that part of the client side, in three parts: the model, the view, and the controller. And those parts are interconnected. So we can see firstly that diagram, you will see lots of diagrams talking about the MVC pattern, and lots of them like are different one another from the other, because sometimes you will see different arrows. I just chose this one because I think it's the one that's most fits into our definition with React and usual definitions without going to complex frameworks. So we can see we have the model, the controller, and the view, and they are the three interconnected. The view always is what the user sees, what we show to the user. So the user can interact with what he or she views. He can produce changes, maybe clicking a button, filling a form, clicking the play button, anything. Like, of course, with the voice, with OK Google or Siri, they can do lots of things interacting with the user interface. As you see, the view in this diagram just communicates with controller, and the controller communicates with the model and comes back. So it's like an arrow. But there are some diagrams where you see that view and model are interconnected. So what is a controller? That's it's like when you go to a restaurant and it's the waiter. Okay, so you are the person who is reading the menu. The menu is the view. The model we will see later is the chef or the cook, and the controller is the waiter. So he's the controller of our order. So the controller handles the changes that the user makes. Every time we interact with the user interface with the view, the controller takes charge of that. Is the user clicked that button, so I have to tell the model what the user is trying to do, and come back with what the model told me, and update the view. So give the user some feedback. Okay. What is a model? The model is the manager. It contains what's called the business logic, the data. The model receives information from the controller, and it gives updates back to the controller and the view. So imagine that's the cook. The view. We are here in the view. We are the user that is reading the menu. There is the waiter. I want some omelets, and the controller says okay. The waiter says okay to the model, to the cook. Yeah, the user wants you to cook some omelet for him, and the model says okay. And when it's ready, communicates the controller, gives the controller the omelette, and the controller updates the user with the new omelette so he can eat it. This is like the easiest pattern. I know that all of you knows it, but I wanted to be sure that all of us know it. So we get into the container presentational component, container pattern, and everything you related to React and Redux. React JS, it's a front-end library. It's a library for building user interfaces. Also, it's not a framework. It's just a library, and it builds UIs. And because it builds UI, it's only focused on the V and the C. Always uses the view and the controller. The model is like is the part of the server. Like it will go like later, like where comes the data. So that's not managed by React. So usually when we are building React application, and the applications we have been building until now, all the views components have been like mixing both layers. Like in this comment, I fetch information, I control what the user does with the handlers and all the, not just with the definition of the handler, or sorry, with the calling the handler. We just define the handler and we make everything, and we have a lot of HTML, a lot of representational data. So we are mixing the view and the controller. And here is where this pattern comes into play, where they say, okay, we can divide components in two siblings, in two components that are synchronized and they are used together. One, the representational, sorry for the typo there, representational component, and the other one, the container component. For starters, what you have to know is that the representational content will have the HTML, the view will get focused over what is shown to the user, and the container component will be like the one that manages the data and the user action. So like we would be put like mostly the view part of the MVC design pattern into the representational component, and we would put the C part of the controller, that means the controller of the MVC pattern, in the container component. Okay. Okay. So what we are going to see now are the basic 4 points of what means a container component, the diffs between containers and components. There are tons of diffs with Redux, with React, and what ones do the others. I wanted to keep it simple because of the keys pattern. Because as I told you, it's not as used pattern as before, or not, because we always see that's something at the end. But because you have to have it clear, begin to use it, learn about it, and later see all the things that they do, and you have the external references for resources for learning more. So a container component, what first does is primarily is concerned with how things work. As I told you, it isn't concerned about representation. It's about how this view is managed, how this view works. Okay, that would be one of the main aspects of container components. Another aspect of these containers is usually they don't have HTML tags inside of them. Okay, because usually they aren't used to show representational data. They don't use to build HTML the view. Maybe we can have the div that wraps something. Usually the easiest container is a container that renders a representational component. No, I told you that they were siblings, but that's not true. It's like usually the container calls or has as a child the components inside, the representational components. So usually all the HTML would be in the other component, in the representational. Okay, so usually they don't have HTML and they are concerned about how things work. That's something that should be easy to recall. Usually they are stateful. Okay, usually they have states. That's why I just don't go with Redux or React. We talk about states. If we're running a non-Redux application, we would be talking about set state of React, about our state managers, and if we are talking about Redux, we can talk about Redux state, React state, or the Redux store, and the dispatching of the actions, or the creation of the actions, and all these kind of things. That's would be related with Redux. Of course, if we are a React view, in a React container, we should be like having the state internally. If we are having a Redux view with that without React state, we would be having like something like all the actions that are going to be dispatched imported, and handling all the things that are going to be dispatched on the container, and passing those actions to the representational component. And for latest is they are responsible for providing data and behavior to our children. Of course, a container component can have other container components as children, but usually in this main pattern is we have a view would be divided in a container, a representational components. The container would have as a child the representational component, the presentational component. So I keep saying representational. Sorry, presentational. Usually like that, as I tell you. So they fetch the data, they have the state, they don't have HTML, they're concerned about how things work, they are the C, the controller part of the MVC, and usually have children as children, the presentational components. Okay, so let's see the representational or presentational components. I just see the typos with my English. Okay, the presentational components now primarily is concerned about how things look. So before we were concerned about how things worked. Now how they look. So we can see like a first understanding of how this pattern can be helpful is because we can't divide, and give a designer or some front-end designer, front-end developer that is focused more in the look and feel of the application and the HTML and CSS, and give them that's part of the component, and they won't be having like those parts of how things work or are controlled. They just see like how things work and little parts of how it works, because it would be encapsulated into the other component. Usually they just have a render method and little logic, because we don't have to thinking about classes or React classes. We just don't have to set a state, use lifecycle events, because we just okay, I have a class, render method with the return HTML inside it. So that would be like the easiest representational component. You have to think that you can have inside a representational component also container components and representational components as children. That means that we can have everything going down. So yeah, they don't know about how the data is loaded or how it's managed by or altered. They say that, okay, I showed this to you, I am connected to the container that manages everything. It gives me my data, and it manages all the changes the user wants to make, because I am only the view, and the other part of the components, the father component, is the controller. So I don't know how it's used. So I'm going to see something important, and this the separations of concerns. That is the another design pattern, and that in that point, in this third point, we see it. I only understand what I'm concerned, and the other things are for you. So they are best written as stateless functional components, just because as they are simple classes, they can be like just functions, constant functions. Okay, but why? Okay, because we have to see about functions versus classes. What we have here is like, okay, when we make until now, this is until last year, we could have classes and functional components. Every time we need the state, we have to write classes, React classes. If we don't have a state, we can use components, functions. If we don't want lifecycle events, if we don't want a state, if we don't want to dispatch, to access the store in products, we just can use functions. So usually if we write a class as a function, usually it's less code for us to write. We don't have to do 2 or 3 lines. We do 2 or 3 lines less, so we write less code. So of course it's more quicker writing time or developing time, but usually we should be having like snippets in our Visual Studio Code or so in our IDE, so it wouldn't be like so much different to be working with one another, but on the paper it's less code. But also less code is less code that we give to the bundle, to the browser, and so it's less code, or less time to load our app, so it should be faster. Here, if I don't have it here, I don't know, let me check. No, it's not here. I have the resource below in the resources page, where one person gives us this example. We write a function component that is, if you can see, that would be on the black part of the code. Function welcome that receives props and returns hello world, hello props name. And this is like a hello world function component. 3 lines for us to write, but we have to see the bubble transpiled code, what is really delivered to the browser, and we can see that is transpiled as a function that returns the result of the calling the create element of React library that creates an h1 with null as classes that has inside hello props name. So this is converted into this. So now the browser would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines. Of course, now this would be wrapped without spaces, without page jump. So a new line. So we would be like talking about name of characters, but you see it's bigger code transpiled. But the important thing is to see how a class is represent. As we see, the easiest class component. In both, we missed the import React from above, so that would be an extra line. But we see that the 3 lines that were written in a function component now become 5 lines. It's not that's different. So now the same class, the same hello world or hello person that comes in the props name, it's written, but now see how this bubble transpiled code appears. We can see that we have here what we had before, like this is the return create elements, but now we have all of internal classes that how inherits the class called check, the possible constructor return, a create class, and the auto call. So everything is like all the check-ins that are made inside React to be, so this is all how this code is created. So there are a lot of divs, different are more approaches that talk you about how classes take more time or are built more times as functions, as constants, because you have to instantiate other objects of a class and create it, remove it, the object, and things like that. But that was like the main reason that why we can use functional components or functions or constant functions as representational components instead of classes, because it's easier. But this is the secret that I'm going to tell you at the end. But in React 16.8, hooks appeared and made a new improvement. Now we can use, and we don't see this in the library, so even that you don't use these webinars, or all of you that see them, if you want an extra class, extra lesson talking about hooks, I won't mind doing it, because you are not watching the hooks during the library. I think they are very nice to do. But in React, so now we can create container components, container components, all these class components as functions, because hooks let us have React state inside functions, and this kind of lifecycle events of the usually classes in React inside functions. So it's a very nice way, so we can write a lot of our classes as functions, so we gain this kind of speed of less load time, and we don't have this separation of concerns so easily. But right now we will be keeping like, okay, functions for representational components and classes for container components. As I told you before, we were using the separation of concerns or SOC pattern. It's like this is for Wikipedia is separating a computer program into different sections. That is called modularizing our code. So every time we have different parts of our application where every part makes one thing. So dividing a component between how it's seeing and how manage the data, we are making more flexible our views, more reusable, because you can reuse the view with different data without a different container. We can use the container with different view, with different presentational components, and this makes us our application usually easier to maintain, because people that comes to our application sees, okay, here he's fetching the API and making some normalization of Redux state, so in the store, sorry. So that's why, that's why it's used the separation of concerns. As I told you, we can have React, and we can use this pattern with React only, or with Redux. It doesn't mean anything. It's just we talk about the state. So we can use with set state in React. We can use it with Redux state, Redux store. We can use it with all other state management tools. So we're going to see a quick example of this pattern using Redux. We have there are lots of examples online where you can see how it's used. You'll see during the classes in the projects how it's used with Twitter clone app, with the project of Would You Rather, or the readable extra project. So I just wanted to say, okay, until now we have been using little examples for us to build and to test, and just thought where we could make like a separation of concerns, and there were a lot of parts where we could be using. I decided to go to the project of the React versus Redux state example, where we had a form, that form which you see in the screen, that talks about user profile data. And because this was like a very bad written form, that where we build like lots of functions, internal functions, to manage the states and to deal with the avatar and like that. So besides, we could be doing a lot of refactoring and composition with our components and building inside internal components. That's not the goal of this nano degree or these webinars, unless you tell me so. So we can go to complex things, but I thought that maybe, because it was a complex form, separating what we see from all the logic that manages what we see and the user does, how the data is fetched, and because it has Redux in it, I thought it was a very nice example to see. It only has like 3 screenshots example, because you have it in the GitHub, and it's like very very dirty to refactor. So the starting branch, if you want to see how we start without doing the split, is the match dispatch to props branch, and the branch where we have the changes done in this webinar is containers user profile, right? So from there, this form is named user profile.js. What I did before is, okay, I want to rename user profile into user profile container, because when you go to the code, let me see if I have it here, because I think it's easier to show you how the code was. Let me check. I have to open. I had it broken. I had it closed. React Redux exercise. React versus. Well, let me check you. That opening user profile. But let me check the container. This is also not source control. No source control. Let me open the terminal and use it. I think my computer is like going slow. Yeah, we check out. Let me map dispatch pro map. So let me show you. This is data from the computer. So let me show you how this view was built. We had like notice. Oh, I think that's it's broken. Something happens here. Wow. I don't know if my direct is working. I think it broke. Let me check, because something happened here. Something happens here. It's broken. It's broken. Right. Okay, so I'm watching that in in YouTube is being watched also, so I don't know why it happens, but I will just continue. Sorry for the interruption. So you see that this is the code. We had like all these imports. We had a class component where it sends the React component. We had the prop types, the internal states, how we get the data from global states, some like internal management for creating the avatar and the user name split. And we had the component mount lifecycle, the on-change, reset state, on-submit, handle image change, and the render if it's loading, return loading, or if not, return all these functions of this view and all the part of React Redux part. So that's because in this part of this code of this work, we had some most of the part were like methods and classes. I said, okay, maybe the part of the render about the HTML should go into another component. So renaming user profile into user profile container would be maybe easier. So that's how we did. So I just made an example. I just like, okay, I just changed the handle image change and the reset change into on image change and on clear form, because what I wanted to do is to pass from the parent, from the container parent, the handlers as one object. So the form, the representational component, that is this one that we're going to see later in the next view, receives only that handler. So we can access all the handlers like handlers dot on wherever. So I just renamed them to be easier to read. So on change, on change event, the on submit event, on image change event, and on clear form. That's like the old reset state. And these are the improvements. We just rename the user profile into user profile container. We just create a new file called user profile. We import it, and we, in the render method, we remove all that part of the HTML that is was inside the previous user profile component, and we call it from here, passing the form data that would be in this case the state. Okay, just the state is all the names for every component in the view and the form, and the handlers. Okay, so that's what we did. So now if we, well, later I will show you how the view is divided, but now user profile with the new view is something like this. Also we can, just we create a const user profile function that receives props, and we create like, okay, from props we take the handlers object, and from form data, that was the state passed to the view, we retrieve all the parts for the function, the avatar, the first name, the last name, the sex, the email, and the loading states. So now we have all the data to use representational data. if loading, we return a view, a component for loading. Otherwise, we return a wrapping div that has the h1 that has inside a form and has a form group for every part of the state or the props that are received by there. So you see, for the first name, we have the form control that has the value, the first name, that's a prop now. Is a state in the container, but now it's a prop. Of course, it's a read-only prop. So we have to pass the onChange, and the onChange, we have the handlers onChange. So as you see, this view now, it's easier to manage how it looks without having to scroll up, scroll down, or with the risk of deleting something with or changing something with a bad replace, or bad refactoring, or maybe someone that doesn't know much about Redux. Imagine that in this case you are building a team, a young team, or not young people, but people that don't know much about React. So when you show them the initial parts of React, and they don't know about Redux, so you give them this, and this, all of you that haven't begun the Redux part, or just if I show this to you 1 month ago, you would say, okay, that's a class that receives like some props and the handlers for those props. So in the above parents, we will be having the state, the numeric state, and the handlers. You don't want to know about actions, reducers, or whatever. You just go and see this. So this is nice. And the other part of the code is now we have the import of all the React Bootstraps parts in this class, and it's not in the other user profile content. And with the prop types. And with the prop types, I wanted to show you how we can also give information to the, for example, person who is using this view, because the person who is using this view might not know how handlers come. Okay, he's using handlers from props, and here he accesses the handlers onChange on the onChange event for first name. But what's handlers we have? So we can use the prop types shape to, of course, also it's good for testing and for avoiding errors. But in this case, see that we have separation of concerns, and one person could be using this view without knowing anything of the other view. So here we have, okay, this view is going to receive a handlers prop. What's its shape? Yeah, an object with an onChange param, or key, on submit key, and on image change key, and on clear form key, and all of them are functions and are required for this view to work. And all these object or that prop type, that prop that is passed with these 4 required functions is also required. So everything inside is required, and all this object or this prop type is required. Also, we could be doing this for from data. I just didn't want to complicate things. Yeah, okay, for from data is okay. You just need to pass the prop type object is required. So besides you have this here, the person who is doing the view just shows how you are accessing, because this is a very way to also document your view. You don't, instead of accessing props.form_data.firstName, you access them from here, and you gain that's readiness and this clarity. But you could use this because if they are required, or maybe there is a field that is not also required. So it's not the most complex view in the world. It's not the most difficult example, but I think that makes the work done. That's the job. Okay, that you see how it works, and we can create. We can see a second example. It's just from another I think it was from a Medium blog, where a person just goes into the reuse of components and containers, because here in this example we just separate the fetching of the data and the view of how it's in the the form. But if we don't refactor and build lots of other components like around a library for managing forms, I recommend you Formic library for that, for avoiding writing lots of codes in your forms. Formic, and but it's not reusable, not much reusable. Some other examples. So just for reusable code in that Medium article. That's if we go here. From Ryan Drew Johnson, Redux in the wild, some practical container examples. Okay, what tells us is, okay, for example, a modal component or alert components, spinner component, loading components, this kind of components that we use over and over in our application, and we can give them different views or different content. So what he does is, okay, creates a model, and this is the component, okay, just how it's seen. So imagine that we have the CSS, because this is like an ideal model. It's not it doesn't go into detail as much as I do with examples that you can write them there and see them. But this just says, okay, I will render the model, I will return this model if and what it has inside is the children. So it's like the content of the model will be always a child component, and it doesn't have the typical header or whatever. And as props will have the children and if it's opened or not. If it's open, it will return that content. If not, null. How this works? If he wants to use it, imagine that we want to use a carousel model. Open a model and show inside of it just views. Like imagine like the typical Amazon product image, where it's on the upside in the upper left corner of the view. In desktop, of course, in the mobile is up, and you click on it and it opens a bigger view with the views that you can pass them as a carousel. That would be a model with a carousel inside. So because we have a component that is built for an image carousel and a component that is for model, we can connect both of them and just say, okay, create a carousel model or a model container. I just called it carousel model because it's like what we are building here. That is the container that comes to retrieves from the gives into the connects to the store. The is open is retrieved from Redux. In this case, it's okay. We go to the model state of models. We ask if is image model open, and we pass it as prop to the child, and we pass another prop that is not retrieved from the state, but creates a child with the image carousel. But all the images, they are stored in the Redux store. So we would be using a model with the carousel model. That means that if you want to show a model with an alert, a model with a test, model with a form, you just pass a child those components. In this case, we can use like the model component, the model representational component. We can call it with carousel model that it's a container component, or we can build another representational component above model, like alert model, maybe because maybe they don't come from the state, but usually in some part of the code you have to check this. Okay, hope you. Sorry for the interruption about YouTube going like crazy at that moment. Just wanted to show you, leave you this hooks idea. If you go to the article where Dan Abramov, you remember that is one of the creators of React and the creator of Redux, well, he works in React team, sorry, and he's the creator of Redux. If you go to his articles about Redux, container components, he talks about a lot of things, but in the above part of the top part of that article, he writes like update from 2019, and he says something like, I wrote this article a long time ago and my views have since evolved. In particular, I don't suggest splitting your components like this anymore. If you find it natural in your codebase, this pattern can be handy, but I've seen it enforced without any necessity and with almost dogmatic fervor far too many times. The main reason I found it useful was because it let me separate complex stateful logic from other aspects of the component. Hooks let me do the same thing without an arbitrary division. This text is left intact for historical reasons, but don't take it too seriously. It's his idea. You have to play around with hooks, with this separation of concerns. But you know, even that you see that you have to divide with representational components and container components, you do it in your projects because it's what you are told. But if you have to like divide it because it's like mandatory, don't do it, because you know for this form I made it. I think it was nice to do it because you know it was very big, but that would be like going into code quality, how much lines, how many lines should have our components. So we should be like composing our components. So you know would be like more like composition concern, that's separation of concerns. But just as always, try to think about for yourself. So let me see if you have some questions. The live is, I wanted to make it shorter, but it's a little bigger because longer because of that. Those 4 minutes where I went, oh, this was broken. Okay, no questions. Okay, as always, the resources. You have these 4 resources and some other links during the view. Of course, you have a lot of information inside your NanoDB dashboard, or so you can review it. So thank you for watching. For those who have finished the Redux Would You Rather project, congratulations, you are ahead of time. Yeah. We still have 3 weeks of webinars for Redux, I think. For those who are beginning the project, congratulations, because you are on the clock. For those who haven't begun, you have a lot of time, so just write me, ask me anything you need. So thank you for watching. As always, we see you at Slack, and stay audacious. Bye.